Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Wall Street clocked out and we are clocked in. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's unusual request, the special room he ordered to be installed at the Pentagon. Plus, tens of thousands of people line up to see Pope Francis one last time. We are live at the Vatican. A woman confronts the gunman who killed her brother and dozens of others in a racist attack, and what happened next may surprise you. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Busy watching Wall Street as investors react to signals from the Trump administration. The trade standoff between the U.S. and China could soon de-escalate. So the closing bell rang just moments ago. The Dow locked in at a 400-point gain. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to you by FinViz. It's showing the top 500 stocks. As you can see, we're looking at a decent amount of green today. And one reassuring message came from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He told the Institute of International Finance the U.S. and China could come together for a so-called beautiful rebalancing.
There is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together.
So CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us live now. Thanks for being here, Kelly. I really think the markets like the word, or investors, I should say, like the word rebalancing. So how did the market react today?
So at one point, we were actually up over 1,000 points, and we finished just about 420 up with the Dow. So definitely in the green, especially after yesterday's rally. Investors were excited to hear more of that messaging that we heard from the Oval Office yesterday, that there was an opportunity for deals, that tariffs wouldn't be 145%, but they wouldn't be 0% on China. But I think you started to see that lose steam about midday because, and you can see it on the chart, right? We started very much up, but we still ended in the green, but not as much, because really nothing has materially changed. It's just the messaging. There's the opportunity for a deal, but even Bessent himself had said yesterday in closed doors that no negotiations have actually taken place. And so I hopped on the phone with a number of investors and I just sort of took the temperature. I was like, what are you thinking? Are we seeing this rally because almost of just a change in messaging? And that was what they said. They said, look, we've been here before. We have seen these upswings and downswings, and the market lost a little bit of steam because I think investors came down to a reality of, look, it doesn't mean that there are deals on the table with China or with any of these other countries. So you're going to see a little bit more of this up and down as we get economic data, as we hear different comments that come out. But there was a little bit of a reality check, and that's why you see that it didn't close down as much as we started the day up, Jules.
Yeah, that is a good point. Okay, so some major U.S. retailers are sounding the alarm over tariffs, saying that they could have empty shelves. So what do we know about that?
So yesterday, there was a meeting that my colleagues in Washington have confirmed where the president met with the CEOs of some of the big retailers out there. That included Walmart, Target, as well as Home Depot. And we do know that Walmart and Target shared their concerns with the president, saying that in a few weeks, because of these tariffs, you could have empty shelves, that supply chains would be disrupted. And if you think about it, these big retailers, they're sourcing product from other countries. They are going to be some of the hardest hit, especially a Target, where they're selling more discretionary items like a Walmart. So it wasn't surprising to hear that this meeting took place, but we don't know anything that came out of it other than the fact that these both sides sort of shared it was a good meeting and they want to focus on the American consumer. But certainly to hear that there's that concern at the highest level of these retail companies, not surprising, but concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kelly O'Grady, thanks as always. In the wake of this week's meeting with those major U.S. retailers, President Trump signals a trade deal between the U.S. and China is in the works. So let's listen to what he had to say just this morning.
We are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active. Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine. And we're going to have a country that you can be proud of, not a laughing stock all over the world for many years.
So CBS News senior White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs joining us live now to break this down. Thanks for being here, Jennifer. What more are you hearing about Trump's meeting with the CEOs of Target, Walmart, Home Depot? Why is his stance on China kind of softening?
It does seem like the president is softening a bit. The president knows how to soothe markets when he wants to. He knows exactly what things he can say that will trigger headlines, that will cause traders to do different things. And so he's had a message over the last few days where he said, listen, I'm not going to fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve. That calmed investors' nerves. He also talked about how he's listening to all these people who are coming in and chatting with him. We know he talked to these big box CEOs. He's talking about making sure that shelves are not empty. I reported last week that the White House is considering doing a task force to consider the supply chain so that they can make sure that goods get to shelves, so that those workers that the White House uses that talking point all the time. They're doing this tariff strategy to help the American worker. So if there's going to be empty shelves and prices spiking, the White House knows it has things that it can do to change that.
Also, I hear that you have a scoop about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth ordering some modifications to a room in the Pentagon. What do you know?
Well, there's a green room that's right next to the Pentagon press briefing spaces, and it was upgraded, modified, renovated in order to put in a makeup area for the Secretary of Defense and other VIPs and other senior officials to use before they go out into the press briefing room. Now, we haven't had any press briefings in the briefing room, but the Secretary of Defense has used that space to go and do live appearances on television. And he's a former Fox News guy. He's a TV guy. So he renovated this area to put in a mirror. He put in a director's chair. And I can tell you, my sources told Ellie Watson and I that it was supposed to be a more elaborate upgrade. It's a pretty simple space with just very minimal furnishings. The idea initially was to spend about $40,000 to have a pretty nice makeup studio with a lighted mirror. It turned out to be more simple, and the Pentagon is stressing that. Defense officials are telling us that they used recycled materials from other parts of the Pentagon so they didn't have to buy new, so that it cost less. But the whole purpose of this is so that the Secretary of Defense can get ready before he goes out and addresses the media or does live TV hits. And as we know, as TV reporters, it is important to have makeup before you go before these harsh television lights. So that's the idea. The other part of it is any cabinet secretary for President Trump has a forward-facing, a media marketing role to his or her job, and Pete Hegseth is one of those people that's very focused on what his message is to the media, to Americans, and to President Trump.
Very interesting. All right. Thank you so much. Interesting information there. All right, so the Trump administration faced with sudden deadline in the case of Kilmar Obrego Garcia's deportation to an El Salvador prison. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to turn over information regarding Obrego Garcia's imprisonment by 6 p.m. Eastern. So CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen is live with more on exactly what the judge is expecting to see from the Trump administration. Hi, Jake.
Hey, how's it going? So really what we saw from yesterday from Judge Paula Zinnes, who's overseen this debacle between the Justice Department and the White House and the plaintiffs in this case, who are attorneys representing Kilmar Obrego Garcia, is that the attorneys have twice now stonewalled the judge and her questions in the courtroom. And as a result of that, she basically said in a hearing 2 weeks ago that she wanted to have, quote, all the balls and strikes and information in front of her so that she can make a real decision on whether the Department of Justice and the White House have violated her orders to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to the U.S. We know the Supreme Court has also offered the same, and that he be treated as if he were accidentally deported, which the Trump administration said that he was. However, it appears that, at least based on allegations from Mr. Abrego Garcia's attorneys yesterday morning, that the Department of Justice is claiming privilege or not giving answers that are sought by Abrego Garcia's attorneys, and also flatly trying to evade the questions that are being asked of them. They're refusing to even give information before the beginning of April, in which we know that Abrego Garcia was in Salvadoran custody for 2 weeks before that. So they're trying to kind of weave around some of the questions that are asked in front of them. And the judge yesterday said that there is a bad faith refusal to comply with these discovery obligations and a willful disregard for her orders. It's certainly notable that really in the center of this case is the refusal to bring him back from the White House, from President Trump, from the Department of Justice, but also now not even complying with this judge's orders, as she's looking to potentially hold them in contempt of court. More to come later today on that, and whether the Department of Justice answers a lot of the basic questions that the judge is trying to force them to respond to.
Yeah, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, let's talk about Mosa Madawi. He's the Columbia student. He participated in pro-Palestine protests. He was in court today. So what came of that particular hearing?
That's right. He is a green card holder who has permanent residency, at least in Vermont for now. The Department of Justice has argued in a number of these cases that the trials of these people and whether or not they should be freed from government custody actually happen where they're being detained. And the Department of Justice has been trying to potentially move this case to Louisiana, where they're trying to potentially detain him. However, we know that a judge today continued a block that was already in place from a different judge that Madawi will remain in Vermont while these proceedings play out, and that next week there'll be a bail proceedings in which Madawi's attorneys will be able to present more evidence to the judge as to why he should not be in federal custody anymore. And we've really seen this across a number of cases. Mahmoud Khalil, the Tufts University student, Rumeysa Ozturk, who remains in detention, that there are kind of two-track cases going on. There are immigration proceedings that the Trump administration undertakes, and then there are federal court proceedings in which their attorneys for these people try to get them free. The Trump administration has said that immigration judges have no authority to free these people, so attorneys for people like Mr. Madawi are banking on district judges around the country to potentially grant them their freedom. We saw Madawi was in person at that court proceeding and handed his attorneys a note to read afterwards and said he'll see you under the sun, and he wanted people to remind themselves that this proceeding is part of democracy and he wants it to play out so that he can be proven innocent, an opportunity that many of these people have not yet had the opportunity to do.
All right, Jake, you are all over it. Jake Rosen, thank you so much. All right, we are taking a live look now at St. Peter's Basilica, where Pope Francis is lying in state ahead of his funeral Saturday. In a break from tradition, he will be laid to rest at St. Mary Major, a church he visited more than 100 times during his time as Pope. Earlier this morning, a procession carried Pope Francis' simple wooden coffin from his residence at Casa Santa Maria through St. Peter's Square and into St. Peter's Basilica. A high flow of visitors came to pay their respects to the late Pope, leading the Vatican to consider extending the time for people to say goodbye. So let's take a listen at some of them sharing their emotional experience.
For this moment, I arrived on Monday for 1 week, and now I had the chance to go there and see the Pope. He was dead, but I saw him and I could say goodbye.
There's kind of just a mixture of emotions. I mean, I'm anxious a lot walking in. It's such a surreal place, and it's very holy, and seeing the body and just remembering everything that he stood for is very important.
Just about a year ago, CBS News senior correspondent Norah O'Donnell interviewed Pope Francis about his legacy. Last night, she was one of the few invited to a private viewing of the Pope. Today, she shared what the experience was like. So let's take a listen.
Good afternoon from here in Rome. We just actually came back from St. Peter's Square, where we were talking to just some of the thousands of people who have come out today to wait in long lines to pay their respects to Pope Francis, who will lie in state for some 3 days inside St. Peter's Basilica. One person all the way from Mexico said they were here because Pope Francis changed her life and changed the world. We had the privilege of a private viewing of Pope Francis last night in his home at Casa Santa Marta, in the chapel there where he used to pray every single day. I just want to take you inside the room because it was just an extraordinary moment. It was silent. We were just feet away from the Pope. At one point, you could hear a little girl crying. But other than that, people wanted to say goodbye, nuns and priests and people who work in the Vatican. And as we left, we were given this prayer card from Pope Francis, a way to remember him in these final days, as many people are coming here to remember him. The state funeral is still planned for Saturday with leaders from all around the world, including President Trump, President Zelensky of Ukraine. Prince William will also be here in St. Peter's Square for this final funeral mass. I'm Nora O'Donnell for CBS News in Rome.
And we will bring you the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday in a CBS News special report. Coverage starts at 4 a.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Pacific on CBS and right here on CBS News 24/7 and Paramount Plus. Another heated town hall, this time in Iowa. The lawmaker facing some tough questions about President Donald Trump's agenda. Next, you're watching CBS News 24/7. In New Jersey, officials say firefighters helped avert a major disaster as a large wildfire in the state continues to burn. So the wildfire in Ocean County, it stands at more than 11,000 acres with 30% containment. The New Jersey Forest Fire Service says the blaze started yesterday in a forest wildlife management area about 55 miles from Philadelphia. Thousands of people were evacuated overnight, but all evacuations have now been lifted. So still, officials, though, caution there is a long way to go before the fire is under complete control.
This could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
So officials say there have been no injuries in the fire and no residential structures were lost. The cause of the fire under investigation. Meteorologist Zoe Mintz joining me now. So the fire emitting a lot of smoke in that area.
Yeah, a lot of smoke in that area, and that's going to be a huge concern when it comes to air quality. And unhealthy air quality has actually been a big issue over the past year. In fact, 25 million more Americans are under that unhealthy air quality. So there's actually a new study, a new report that finds almost half of Americans are breathing that unhealthy level of air pollution. We're talking about 156 million people, and that's according to the American Lung Association. Here's a look at the top 5 areas. Taking the top spot is Bakersfield, California. Actually, 4 out of the 5 top spots are in California, followed by Visalia and Fresno, California. Eugene, Springfield, Oregon, I should say, came in 4th. And the Los Angeles area ranked in 5th. And the reason that you might be wondering California is in 4 out of the 5 top spots is because of the location of those areas. First of all, there are so many people that live in California and produce a lot of pollution. Those pollutants get trapped in the Central Valley and kind of just stay overhead, especially in the wintertime in places like Bakersfield, which is why they're at the top of the list of that bad air quality. The report does show how warmer weather, drought, and wildfire smoke, all those things are changing our air quality and only making it worse and worse as the years progress. I do kind of want to take a closer look at the place that has the worst air quality right now, and that's New Jersey. It's not necessarily the place that normally has the worst air quality, but because of how much smoke is in the air, let's take a look at that matrix right now, or take a look at our graphics behind me. It's the Jones Road fire. Right now, most of the action, most of the smoke is currently sitting over the ocean, but I want to warn everybody who lives in New York City, you are going to be getting a thick blast of smoke that's going to arrive overnight tonight, and waking up early Thursday morning, it is going to be a thick layer of smoke. If you have asthma, if you have sensitive lungs, I want to make sure that you put a mask on, not necessarily to keep yourself not sick, but to keep yourself away from all of that nastiness in the air. Those pollutants are no joke. And again, they are going to stick around Thursday and into Friday. But there is some good news, Jules. That smoke is likely going to get pushed away by rain on Saturday. So rain definitely going to help those fire conditions, going to hopefully help ease that amount of smoke in the air. But they have at least a couple more days to get through a very, very bad air quality.
Yeah, take precautions, Zoe. Good information.
Yes.
Thank you. A moment of forgiveness in an El Paso courtroom as the man who killed 22 people at a Walmart back in 2019 received a hug from two family members of the victims. So you're looking at pictures right now of one of the women, Adriana Zandri, who lost her husband in this shooting. CBS News national reporter Karen Waugh has the story.
It's a very emotional week for victims' families as convicted mass shooter Patrick Crusius is brought to justice. Crusius, who's now 26, pled guilty. As part of a plea deal, the district attorney took the death penalty off the table, but Crusius has now been sentenced to 23 consecutive life terms in prison, one term for each of the people he killed. He will have no possibility of parole. Crusius largely stood emotionless in front of this crowd, this packed courtroom of victims' families, as each of them gave their impact statements. Some victims' families even offered him a hug of forgiveness. The attack happened about 6 years ago in August of 2019. Crusius drove from his home in Allen, Texas, about 10 hours to El Paso to specifically target Hispanic people. Inside that Walmart that day, he killed 23 people and injured 22 other people. It's considered the deadliest attack on Hispanics in modern U.S. history. Now, Crusius's attorney says Crusius has long struggled with mental health issues and was heavily influenced by racial misinformation. But he, quote, accepts responsibility for his actions. Back to you.
Our map takes us to Illinois now, where a judge decides the fate of the Highland Park parade shooter. Back in 2022, the 4th of July parade shooting killed 7 people and wounded 48. Last month, a man named Robert Crimo III pleaded guilty to all 69 counts of murder and attempted murder. Today marks the start of his sentencing hearing, where a judge hears more than 50 impact statements from victims, witnesses, and family members. Jumping the map now to New York, new surveillance video shows a woman sneaking past 2 layers of security at JFK Airport to board a flight without a boarding pass. You might remember the story. Back in November, a woman named Svetlana Dali hopped on a Delta flight from NYC to Paris. So looking at the video up close, keep your eyes on the bottom center portion of your screen now. Dali has a gray hood, a black jacket, and a green backpack. So you can see her walk past the agents at the gate without scanning a boarding pass. So cameras also captured her in a tan sweater going through TSA security without any trouble. All right, bringing us back to Texas now, where a convicted murderer is set to be executed today, barring any last-minute stays from the U.S. Supreme Court. As CBS News Texas' Marvin Hurst reports, it's justice 2 decades in the making for one North Texas father whose daughter was murdered.
I actually come up with that name.
Mark O'Neill stopped the flow of his day to talk about the apple of his eye, his only daughter, Rachel O'Neill Tolleson.
Turned into a really good young lady. She was going to go to school, back to college to be a teacher.
Then March 18th, 2004 happened. Investigators say Moises Sandoval Mendoza took O'Neill Tolleson away from where she lived, leaving her 6-month-old baby girl alone at the house.
She would have never left her baby at home. I, in my heart, knew that something bad had happened.
Search crews and community support in Farmersville could not bring back his first child, his only daughter.
Basically, he admitted right away that he did kill her. And I knew from the very beginning, once they arrested him, that he was guilty.
Mendoza told investigators he choked her, dragged her into a field, stabbed the 20-year-old to ensure she was dead. He moved her body to a pit in a remote location and set it on fire.
The pain eases up, but it never goes away. And, I mean, it's basically destroyed my family.
Mendoza was convicted of capital murder, death by lethal injection. 21 years later, the O'Neill family says they're still waiting.
I'm just ready for it to be over with. I'm ready for him to get what he has coming to him and what he's had coming to him for a long time.
Mendoza is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to stop the execution because he says he had ineffective lawyers at trial. As a matter of fact, his attorney says, we believe Mendoza's claim has merit and we're hopeful the Supreme Court will grant review and a stay. But the Collin County District Attorney says the family has carried the weight of her brutal murder for over 21 years, enduring not only unimaginable grief, but also the long, drawn-out process of state and federal litigation in a case where the killer's guilt has never been in doubt.
My heart goes out to his family. I don't forgive him. I don't forgive him at all.
Marvin Hurst, CBS News, Texas.
Meta and Apple ordered to pay millions of dollars in fines, the law the tech giants are accused of breaching. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Back out live to Vatican City, where Roman Catholic cardinals are gathering to decide when to hold the conclave to elect a new pope. The European Union is telling Apple and Meta to pay up after watchdogs hit the tech giants with hundreds of millions of dollars in new fines. The European Commission claims Apple and Meta breached what's called the Digital Markets Act. So Matt Binder, a reporter from Mashable, joining us live now with more on this. Thanks so much for being here. Question for you. So Meta is kind of calling this a penalty, like a tariff. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. I think the reason why Meta is calling this a tariff is because they know that this is sort of the buzzword right now that the broader American public are familiar with, and they have a negative sentiment towards tariffs. So they're hoping that the public looks at this in that same negative way as well. The EU is putting a tariff on an American company, Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, these services that you enjoy. But in reality, Meta is basically being fined for breaking EU law. The EU passed this array of regulatory rules over the past couple of years, one of them being the Digital Markets Act. And this is basically meant to spur competition. And they've announced that basically some of these big tech companies run what is called gatekeeping platforms. These platforms that essentially other companies have to sort of build upon because these big tech companies have built like the platform in that area. So in order to, make sure that competition is fair, even in those circumstances, there are some rules and regulations that these companies must abide by. In this case, Meta is being fined for essentially saying to users in the EU that you either have to give us your data or you have to pay a fee to use a version of Facebook that does not take your data, but also doesn't show you ads, because of course they take your data in order to serve you advertising. The EU says this isn't right, that users shouldn't be forced to give over this data or have to pay. And this is the fine they've levied on Facebook for breaking those regulations in the EU.
Good explanation there. Okay, let's talk about Tesla. So yesterday, its earnings report fell short of expectations. But then if you take a look today, the stock actually climbed. So what are you hearing from investors?
So basically, I think a lot of people are, there's this phrase that's really taken off over the past couple of years among especially young investors, that you buy the dip. And a lot of people are viewing this as sort of just a temporary blip in the longer, game for Tesla. Tesla is the EV car company in the U.S. And with EVs continuing to grow across the world, investors think that, Tesla will, this is the dip, buy low and then right now. And then, in a couple of months, maybe a year or two down the line, Tesla will once again regain its glory. Musk might be out of the spotlight. And Tesla has all these things that Musk has promised in the pipeline coming down the pike. And they're hoping that, they're buying at a low point, which will bring them a much greater reward down the line. Other people don't think that's the case. Tesla admitted in their filings with the SEC just this quarter that those protests against Tesla because of Elon Musk and his connection to President Donald Trump and the administration via Doge, has really been hurting the company. And that's one of the risks that they've claimed in their filings to the SEC. So, it remains to be seen whether this is a temporary blip or has Elon Musk sort of tainted the good name of Tesla from now on.
All right, we'll keep watch. So will you. Matt Binder with Mashable. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. President Trump's trade war with China is impacting the Southern California economy. The Port of Long Beach says ship traffic is expected to fall 40% there next month. CBS News Los Angeles' Tom Waite has more on how this could hurt workers.
At the Port of L.A. and Long Beach, the impacts of President Trump's tariff war have arrived, and the numbers are stunning. Mario Cordero is the chief executive officer of the Port of Long Beach.
For the week beginning May 4th, San Pedro Bay Complex looks like it's going to have a 44% drop in vessel calls when you compare that year to year. That's a significant number.
The Port of Long Beach relies heavily on imported goods arriving from China, which President Trump hit with tariffs of up to 145%.
I think what we're going to look to now in the second quarter of 2025 and also the third quarter, a substantial reduction in cargo volume. And as you know, our imports here at the Port of Long Beach overwhelmingly come from Asia, more specifically China.
A new report from LA County's Economic Development Corporation laid out some sobering new numbers detailing the impacts of President Trump's tariffs. The report says the tariffs threaten $500 billion in revenue for the region and put 2 million local workers at risk.
The World Trade Organization estimated that if this trade war with China continues, they're expecting U.S. and China trade to decrease by approximately 80% if it continues.
And business leaders warn of a ripple effect harming the local economy. This from a man who builds warehouses across SoCal.
One thing that I think is more anecdotal, but it's real recent and it's hot, is we've had multiple lease deals on industrial properties in the Inland Empire and in the South Bay over the last 2 weeks get paused.
And there's this. When companies cancel warehouse space, they also don't hire IT, insurance, and security companies. More local jobs lost. Professor of economics Larry Harris explains that even if tariffs ultimately convinced manufacturers to move production here, prices would still remain higher.
If indeed production moves to the United States, prices will be higher too. And the reason why is that for the items that are not produced in the United States, the reason they're not produced in the United States is because we can't produce them as cheaply as other people can.
Bottom line, less cargo arriving at the ports means less jobs and a crushing blow to Southern California's economy.
The fundamental view from a Port Authority perspective, less cargo volume, less jobs. 1 in 9 jobs come in the region of Greater Los Angeles are from the port complex. 2.6 million throughout the U.S. supply chain are directly or indirectly from Port of Long Beach operations.
Meanwhile, a new study gives us some insight into what Americans worry about when they think about retirement. The data shows most Americans are more scared of going broke in their golden years than they are of death. Researchers surveyed 1,000 U.S. adults aged 25 and older, all of them earning incomes of $50,000 and above. 64% of respondents said looking ahead, they're more worried about their wallets than the prospect of death. Country music star Jelly Roll is one step closer to clearing his criminal record. That's next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Okay, so you can see there, things got pretty heated. This at a town hall held by Senator Chuck Grassley earlier this morning. He met with constituents in Northwood, Iowa. It's a town of about 2,000 people. Attendees clashed with opposing viewpoints on the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They also questioned Senator Grassley about President Trump's first few months in office, Social Security benefits, and DOJ cuts. On to country music star Jelly Roll. He's one step closer to receiving a pardon for crimes he committed when he was younger. So the Tennessee Parole Board recommended a pardon just yesterday. They issued a non-binding, unanimous resolution after holding a hearing for the 40-year-old Nashville native. Jelly Roll, whose real name is Jason DeFord, says he spent most of the years between ages 14 and 25 behind bars. His most serious convictions were for robbery and drug charges. Jelly Roll first became a rapper in prison before blending his skills with country music, which earned him 4 Grammy nominations in February. Have you ever wondered if your coworker is a bot? Well, now you may have to. We've heard of fake job listings, but companies say they're working to stop fake job seekers as new employment scams target both sides of the market. So CBS News confirms Melissa Matani explains what this troubling trend is all about.
Not only do people need to be aware of fake job listings these days, now they need to be on the lookout for fake job seekers. And these aren't just real people auditioning for a job, but AI-generated avatars impersonating humans. Take a look at this example.
Can you take your hand and put it like in front of your face to like cover it partially? If you don't do it, we'll end the conversation right now.
So we spoke to the interviewer in that video, David Marzadlow, who told us this was the second time something like this had happened at his 3-year-old cybersecurity company. He said it's completely changed the company's hiring process, which now includes an in-person meeting. So why are people doing this? Well, people impersonating others isn't new. Often it's to infiltrate a company to get information or sometimes to instill malware. Sometimes it can be innocent for people who want to juggle a remote job whilst also doing an in-person one. But AI technology is making impersonation easier and faster to do, and that's a problem for tech companies. Research and advisory firm Gartner estimates that by 2028, 1 in 4 candidates worldwide will be fake. And scammers are tackling both sides of the job market. Here's Microsoft's Vice President of Fraud on the issue.
This is where AI is being used to either attract people for the jobs, or they're creating jobs that don't exist to be able to scam people out of money.
So, for real job seekers out there who are looking for a legitimate job, here are some tips to spot those fake listings. First, don't give away any money or personal information up front. Second, make sure you can verify the listing by cross-checking that it exists on the company's official jobs page. And finally, look for AI errors and inconsistencies like the email not matching the name of the person reaching out. And of course, follow CBS News Confirmed on social for more tips. Melissa Matani, CBS News, New York.
It is like a scene out of a movie how an inmate was able to escape from prison. The dramatic jailbreak next. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Ceremonies were held around the world to remember the 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis. One of those ceremonies was held at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Speakers included survivors who volunteer at the museum. Let's take a listen.
My name is Joan da Silva. Pictured here relaxing on the rolling hills of Poland are my mother, my 2 aunts, and my grandmother. Only my mother survived the Holocaust. I never had a chance to get to know them, or myself for that matter. At age 5½, I had to pretend I was someone else in order to survive. Everything was taken away from me before I had a chance to get my bearings in this world, and I still feel the effect today.
This year marks 80 years since the Holocaust ended in 1945. News we're following around the world. India's interior minister met with the families of victims after a recent attack by suspected militants killed 26 people in the Kashmir territory. It was the worst attack on civilians in India since 2008. Tens of thousands of Indian security forces are spread out across Kashmir in response to this attack. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake hit western Turkey earlier today. More than 150 people were injured. It is one of the strongest quakes to hit the region in recent years. There were no immediate reports of damage, but people evacuated buildings as the quake shook the city. And then there's this. It's viral video footage. It shows a 22-year-old prisoner escaping from a prison in Peru. John Kennedy Javier Sebastian was one of 10,000 inmates in Lima's most crowded prison. The prison service says he bypassed security controls by climbing a fence and accessing an area they called no man's land. Then he climbed over a wall topped with spikes and razor wire. The head of the prison was dismissed after the escape. America Decides with Weijia Jiang is next. The Supreme Court will soon hear arguments on President Trump's plan to end birthright citizenship. Several states are suing the move, including New Jersey. We'll speak to the state's attorney general. We leave you now with a live look into St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, where mourners continue to say a final farewell to Pope Francis. You're watching CBS News 24/7.